Hello, this is Richard Kuhns of the Stress Management Institute, welcoming you to Sleeping Peacefully Through the Night. This program is in two parts. Part 1 is for your conscious mind, your intellectual self. Listen to Part 1 as often as possible, while driving your car, at home, wherever. Listen to Part 2, the relaxation hypnoidal portion, with subliminal suggestions, every night as you go to bed. It is for your subconscious mind. Part 1 is found on tracks 1 through 3. Part 2, the relaxation, is on track 4. This program is not intended as a cure for insomnia. Insomnia is a medical term and a medical problem for which you need to seek medical advice. Sometimes sleeplessness can be a side effect of a particular medication. It can also be a symptom of clinical depression, which is also an issue for which you need professional psychological assistance, and may find the Up From Depression program available on my website very interesting in helping to understand the subject of depression. Aside from the medical and psychological issues that I just mentioned, difficulty in sleeping can be attributed to 3 basic reasons, and dealing with all 3 will augment any medical or psychological treatment you are undergoing. 1. Nutritional deficiencies. 2. Stress overload. And 3. Conditioning. Now, if your quality of sleep is poor or less than desired, the first and easiest thing to do is to use calcium citrate, available in most health food stores as a liquid. Take it every night a half hour before bedtime. I would imagine you've already gotten rid of caffeinated beverages. But remember, chocolate has caffeine, and so do many teas. If you have a particular food allergy, it could also create anxiety and sleeplessness. The best way to identify a food allergy is to keep an eating diary. List everything you eat and drink, and note your feelings physically and emotionally within 20 minutes to an hour after you eat or drink anything. Do it for a week, and then look for patterns of when you felt anxious, irritable, depressed, and what you might have eaten 20 to 60 minutes before. Also look for any foods or drink that may be a habit. You just must have that bagel or that soda. It's often what you feel you can't go without having to which you're addicted. It's generally the food or drink of which you're very fond and not necessarily something that you eat before bedtime. Hypoglycemia, which is caused by eating high-sugar foods and processed flours, can also contribute to insomnia. Give yourself half a chance by moving away from white flour as found in many breads, rolls, bagels, and pastries. And move away from foods with sugar, corn syrup, and high fructose, as you'll find in commercially prepared cookies, soda, juices, ice creams. Eat foods made of whole flours and drink only unsweetened juices. Let's look at the stress response. Whenever something threatens our lives, like somebody physically attacking us or a near auto accident, our brain prepares us to fight or run. It's called the fight or flight. Of course, you'd ask, what's the relevance? Whenever your brain perceives something of a threatening nature, it prepares your body to fight or run. Any one of the following occurs. Your blood pressure goes up. Sweat glands activate. Muscles tighten. Anxiety is heightened. IQ drops. Fingers and toes become cooler. So what's the connection? I mean, you're lying in bed trying to sleep, nothing is threatening your life, right? Yes and no. Before I explain, let's look at the stress response. There are 3 steps in the stress response, otherwise known as a general adaptation syndrome, GAS. First, there's the alarm. It's a stressor that takes you away from your homeostatic level. Second is the resistance phase, which is the body's attempt to get back to homeostasis. Homeostasis is when the body is in a neutral, inactivated state. If we're being physically attacked, we'll physically defend ourselves, or in a case of a near accident, channel that energy into defensive driving, and hopefully not into frozen fear. The end result is to get things back to the original state. Hopefully homeostasis. I say hopefully homeostasis because many of us adapt to higher and higher levels of stress year after year and end up with a pseudo-heightened homeostatic level. In other words, we adapt to higher and higher levels of body activation, all the while thinking we're at normal levels and that we're relaxed. Thirdly, if one doesn't get back to homeostatic level, exhaustion is the end result. Unfortunately, going to sleep with exhaustion doesn't provide restful sleep, as you pretty well know, and you awaken feeling like you haven't slept at all. So where does the anxiety, the elevated blood pressure, and muscle tension come from? During the second stage, the resistance stage, is when the body automatically activates the fight or flight, which is also known as the sympathetic nervous system. Restful sleep requires activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, which doesn't happen if the sympathetic system is activated. Back to the original question. Why is your body preparing itself to fight or run when you're in bed wanting to sleep, and there's no physical threat to you? It's important to understand that the fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system, is not only activated when there is a real physical threat, but also when there is a threat to your ego, your family status, your self-worth, your finances, or your social status. The fascinating thing is that your brain, which is responsible for the activation, doesn't care whether it's a real threat or a perceived threat. Of course, when there's a real threat, it's easy to see the connection and understand what's happening, and once you get done fighting or running, you get back to normal. However, who are you going to fight or run away from when your ego, self-worth, family, social or financial status is threatened? That's right. There's no one or nothing that you can fight or from which to run. Yet your brain has prepared you to fight or run just the same. What part of the brain is responsible for this? It's the part that's connected to our five senses, the subconscious brain. Now, if I did a good job at explaining this, you understand that your conscious intellectual brain knows why the anxiety and insomnia is there, the fight or flight. Yet it is your emotional unconscious brain that still believes you are in the midst of a physical threat and needs to be ready to defend yourself. While this is happening, your body is circulating corticoids, steroids, adrenaline, a plethora of hormones getting you ready to fight or run to save your life. It's normal that without this understanding, you would compound the situation by being further upset with yourself, thinking it's stupid that you can't sleep. This would be a self-put-down. Our goal is to bring the emotional unconscious brain up to date to agree with the conscious intellectual brain. In other words, let your subconscious brain know that as you're lying there in bed, that there is nothing you want to run from or fight, and that you can relax and sleep and be free of anything attacking you physically as you sleep. I once brought a cuckoo clock home, and after I had fallen asleep, my subconscious awakened me when it heard the cuckoo clock cuckoo. Even though my conscious brain heard the cuckoo clock cuckoo earlier that day, my subconscious wasn't yet educated. So my subconscious awakened me. Uh-oh, there's a strange sound. Could be a threat. Of course, I awakened only to realize that it was a cuckoo and said to myself, I'd like to sleep through the cuckoo. This, in a way, is my conscious bringing my unconscious brain up to date. After a few more checks by my subconscious waking me up, it eventually got the message that the cuckoo wasn't a threat and let me sleep. This is your goal, and because your subconscious has a long history of perceiving a physical threat, there's more of a challenge than if we simply bring the cuckoo clock into your home. The biggest mistake you can make is to get upset with yourself, for now that you understand the goal, you probably create an expectation that you'll be able to do this basic chore and get on with sleeping, or maybe you're thinking that this is an oversimplification, there's got to be more to it than this. One lady had trouble sleeping because the steam pipe in her bedroom made noises during the night. I mentioned to her that some of us live near airports, train tracks, and never hear the airplanes or trains go by. The subconscious can adjust, as the cuckoo example, at which time it becomes only a part of the background noise. She insisted that the only reason she took the apartment was because it was in the rear of the building, away from street noises, and she felt cheated that she had to deal with these noises in the pipes. In part, her attitude wasn't helping the matter. She didn't want to accept that there was something beyond her control, something beyond her sphere of influence. In her mind, she was paying for a quiet apartment, and all the explanations in the world about how steam heat works and how it does make noises didn't make a difference to her. She was unwilling to accept the noise in the first session. In our second session, we talked about when she first remembered noise being a problem. It was when she was a child. It was often noisy with her parents arguing at night. She could never go to sleep with the arguing because she was fearful that her angry stepmother would hurt her father, which would be a threat to her family status. Now, many decades later, the steam pipe keeps her on edge. Of course, she didn't feel physically threatened by the steam pipes. She felt physically threatened as a little girl by the noise her parents made and feared for her dad's safety. Slightly a different reference, but still the same goal. And if it weren't for her attitude about paying for a quiet apartment in the first place, we could have had success in just one session. With this issue, though, we had to take a look at the Serenity Prayer and realize there are things beyond our control about which it's impractical to try to control, like trying to fight City Hall by yourself. Sure, she was right about supposing to be in a quiet apartment, but you can't fight an old-fashioned steam furnace. Once that was handled, the essence remained the same, and that was that the subconscious perceived the noise made by the pipes as a physical threat, and the goal was to bring her unconscious mind up to date to understand that her life was not being physically threatened, and that she could simply sleep through the noise. Another woman was fearful of thunder and lightning. Her first memory was when she was a child. There was a tree outside her bedroom window, and she saw it sway widely. She was fearful that the lightning and thunder would cause the tree to hit her room, thereby a threat to her being. Today, as an adult, she has no trees outside her windows and understands that she has a misunderstanding of how storms affect trees. Yet, her subconscious mind perceives lightning and thunder as a threat, as when she was a child. 2 sessions and a few storms later, she reported success in bringing her subconscious mind up to date and that she was able to sleep through a thunder and lightning storm. If it is noises that keep you awake, and you have difficulty bringing your subconscious mind up to date, as I did with the cuckoo clock, then you'll want to think back to when you first had noise as an issue in keeping you awake, and what that noise meant to you, as in the 2 previous examples. Most likely, you were afraid that if you went to sleep during the noise, something bad might happen, a threat to family or personal health. You then use this information to let your subconscious know that those conditions no longer exist in your life, and that it's okay to sleep through the noise today. If you have difficulty doing this on your own, you might consider soliciting the service of a professional hypnotist, and you can contact the National Guild of Hypnosis at 603-429-9438 to find a hypnotist in your local area. Of course, you may have a completely quiet environment and wish it were only environmental sounds with which you were dealing. More about that later. There are 3 levels to success, and it's important to do all of them simultaneously. 1. Handle the nutrition. 2. Remember that whenever you have difficulty sleeping, it's because your brain perceives something as a threat to your survival. Bring your brain up to date and tell it there's nothing happening that requires you to fight or run. 3. Most likely your ego or self-worth is being challenged. It may be important for you to redefine yourself. I don't say that lightly. If you see someone's car get hit in a parking lot, it doesn't upset you. Yet if your car is hit, you'd be upset, meaning you identified with your car. It has become an extension of how you know yourself, in which case it's important to rewrite your identity. Let me put in a plug for 2 other programs, Building Self-Worth and Overcome Life Crises, available through my website. Some language that helps. For instance, your subconscious, by virtue of keeping you awake, is creating anxiety, whether it be from rehashing the day or worrying about tomorrow's events. It is telling you that there's a physical threat to your physical being in your immediate vicinity. Now this is important, so let me repeat it. It's important for you to know that as you are lying sleepless in your bed with thoughts rampant, your subconscious, by virtue of the fact that you are still awake, has partially prepared you to fight or run as if there were a physical threat in your immediate vicinity. You now consciously know it's only a threat to your ego, but your subconscious perceived it as a threat to your physical being. Instead of calling yourself stupid or dumb, notice that your intelligence simply has different opinions and thank it for its opinion. Sound silly? Well, if you ask a friend for advice and he or she gave you advice, what would you say? First, you'd probably repeat it to make sure you understood what he or she said, and then you'd thank your friend, right? What would happen if instead you called your friend stupid or dumb? Would that jeopardize your relationship? Get in the habit of thanking your subconscious and its interpretation. Thank you, brain. Thanks for your opinion. You have this idea that right now I should be ready to fight or run from something. Thanks for your opinion. There is no real physical threat, and I'd like to go to sleep and sleep soundly through the night. Now look to see if your ego or self-worth are being threatened. Life brings ever-changing circumstances, which means many things happen beyond our sphere of influence. This means we often suffer threats and losses to our family, finances, employee, interest, and relationships. Again, even though you may know consciously that you're dealing with an emotional loss, your subconscious mind finds it a threat and prepares you to fight or run. When this happens, it's important to not only bring your unconscious brain up to date and remind it that there's no physical threat, but also be willing to redefine yourself. It's normal that we define ourselves by our accomplishments, relationships, finances, leisure activities, and even our physical well-being. And when losses are suffered, it's important to remind yourself that you like to redefine yourself and let go, or learn from the experience, or somehow benefit or profit, or simply get beyond being affected and leave your body out of it. In other words, there's nothing to physically fight or from which to run, so there's no need to activate the sympathetic nervous system. That is to tense up, raise your blood pressure and heart rate, and that instead you prefer to turn it over to your creative brain to handle. The Overcome Life Crisis program consists of 2 CDs which gives you the ABCs of redefining yourself. Dale Carnegie, in his book, Stop Worrying and Start Living, sums it up this way. Ask yourself what the worst possible thing is that could happen to you. Once you accept that the worst is the worst and that somehow you could go on, you effectively have redefined yourself. Redefining yourself can be scary, but remember that you have assigned the value of things, people, finances, and so on that are challenging your self-worth. To help your redefinition throughout the day, it's important that whenever you catch yourself thinking or worrying about a situation, remind yourself that you'd like to see the situation differently. You'd like to learn from it, somehow profit by it, let go, forget about it, be in a position to benefit others. Leave your body out of it, meaning that you want to deal with it with your intellect and leave your fight or flight out of it. The third contributing factor is conditioning. Some insomniacs actually drift off to sleep during the day. Not a restful sleep, but then when they want to sleep, they lie endlessly awake. The bed has become associated with a place to worry. Trying to sleep and worrying about life's issues go round and round. Part of this is what we've already handled, part of the brain preparing to fight or run. However, on another level, the bed is simply a conditioned response to worry. The first step is to acknowledge that the bed is a worry chamber instead of a sleep chamber. The second step is to program your brain to change its association. I like my bed to be a cue to sleep. Sounds silly, yet that's the goal. Now is to observe. Rather than expect a miraculous change, simply observe without judging the results as good or bad. Know that there is usually a break, maybe only a small one, in intensity, of your concerns that your subconscious brain can take advantage of that small change to provide you improved sleep, if not for the entire night, for several hours. And as this happens, you gain confidence in your ability to stretch the time periods. Now some tips. As you lie in bed, should you notice thoughts going through your mind keeping you awake, then keep a diary next to your bed, or use a portable recording device, or some cell phones have the capability of recording notes, to make notes so you can sleep with confidence that the notes will be at your disposal the next day. Secondly, if they are worrisome thoughts, notice that even though you are not very anxious or upset, you nonetheless are activated, and that it is your subconscious perceiving a threat to your ego. Avoid trying to force these thoughts out of your mind, for what you resist persists. Instead, acknowledge the thought and say mentally or aloud in a whisper, "Thank you, brain," or "Thank you," and your name. There's no reason for me to fight or run because of this thought. I'd like you, my creative brain, to go to work, solve the problem, to deal with it tomorrow, relate to my bed as a place to sleep, and go to sleep. Because you're bringing your subconscious mind up to date, it may take several repetitions before your brain accepts the message. This concludes part 1 of Sleeping Through the Night. For other programs complementary to this one, visit www.dstressdoc.com. That's D as in day, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, R as in red, E as in easy, S as in Sam, another S as in Sam, D as in day, O as in out, and C as in cat.com. This program is copyrighted by the Stress Management Institute, 28 Tyndall Road, Middletown, New Jersey, 07748. Federal law expressly prohibits the copying or transcription of this material without written authorization from an authorized representative of the Stress Management Institute.